Dawn hovered over the war-torn valley like a trembling breath. Not yet light, not still night, just that fragile in-between where shadows stretched long and uncertain across the broken earth, and the wind carried whispers of everything that had been lost. The smell of burnt metal lingered over the ridge, mixing with dust that drifted in thin, ghostly sheets each time the breeze stirred. Far below, the ruins of a shelled-out village lay in bruised colors, grays, deep browns, and streaks of black where fire had swallowed walls whole. Captain Adrian Hale stood at the edge of the ridge, staring down at the valley as if the earth itself were speaking to him. Maybe it was. Maybe it always had. He just didn't know how to listen anymore. Behind him, the camp stirred awake. The low hum of generators buzzed like an irritated insect. Boots shuffled against gravel. Metal clanged as someone loaded ammunition into crates. But Adrian heard none of it the way he once did. War had changed its sound for him. It no longer roared, it pressed. Heavy, constant, like a hand gripping the back of his neck. His fingers tightened around the dog tags hanging from his hand. The tags weren't his. They belonged to Lieutenant Marcus Hale, his younger brother. The metal felt cold even in the rising heat of dawn. "You should be resting," Corporal Jensen murmured as he approached, his voice low, respectful, but edged with concern. "We move in 2 hours. Recon's risky today." Adrian didn't turn around. Everything is risky these days. "That doesn't mean you shouldn't sleep." Sleep. The word felt foreign, useless. Sleep was where the memories hunted him. Marcus's laughter, Marcus's certainty, Marcus's blood on the sand. Adrian swallowed hard, as if pushing the image back down into the cage he'd built for it. "We lost comms with the southern outpost last night," Jensen continued. "If the rebels hit it." They did. Adrian's voice was carved from exhaustion and certainty. "That plume of smoke wasn't an accident." "Command still hasn't confirmed." "I don't need confirmation." Silence stretched between them. The valley felt even colder. Jensen finally exhaled and stepped back. "Breakfast is ready, if you're coming." Adrian didn't answer. He stayed on the ridge even after Jensen's footsteps faded. He waited for the sun to rise, not because he wanted light, but because light meant movement, action, purpose, anything but the quiet where memory crept in. When the horizon finally cracked open, spilling gold across the wreckage, Adrian felt something shift. Not peace, not hope, but inevitability. He slid Marcus's dog tags back under his shirt and turned toward camp. They set out just after sunrise. The recon convoy, 2 jeeps and a weather-beaten transport, rolled slowly across the valley floor, dust blooming beneath the tires and pale clouds that curled behind them like ghost trails. Adrian sat in the front passenger seat, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning every ridge, every abandoned structure, every glint of metal that wasn't sand. The silence inside the jeep was thick. Jensen drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping anxiously against his thigh. The younger soldiers in the back whispered to each other, too quietly to hear, but not quietly enough to hide their nerves. "You feel that?" Jensen muttered. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What?" "The air. It's too still." He was right. No wind, no rustling sand, no distant echoes. A desert this quiet was never empty. It was watching. "Slow down," Adrian ordered. The jeep crawled to a halt. Adrian lifted his binoculars, scanning the broken structures clustered near the dry riverbed ahead. The village looked abandoned, doors missing, walls caved in, roof beams charred black. But abandonment meant little out here. Then he saw it. Movement. Small, quick. Barely a flutter at the corner of a window. "Someone's there," Adrian said. "Rebels? Maybe. Maybe not." He zoomed in. Not a rebel. Eyes stared back at him, wide, startled, framed by a scarf the color of deepest crimson. A woman. She darted back into the shadows as if the sight of soldiers had burned her. Adrian lowered the binoculars slowly. His pulse did something strange, abrupt. "A civilian," Jensen said, "or bait." "Both are possible." Adrian exhaled through his teeth. The red scarf lingered in his mind like a stroke of color in a world gone monochrome. "We move on foot," Adrian ordered. "Quiet, weapons low unless fired upon." "Sir, you think she's alive in there because she wants to be?" "I think she's alive in there because she has no other choice." They dismounted, boots hitting sand in muffled thuds. The heat pressed down like a physical weight. The silence deepened, becoming almost unbearable as they approached the nearest building. Adrian stepped through the broken doorway first. The interior smelled of ash and damp earth. Sunlight broke through cracks in the roof, slicing the darkness into bright, narrow beams. A clay pot lay shattered across the floor. A blanket was curled in a corner, still warm. Too warm. "She's close," Adrian whispered. A sound answered him. Not speech, not movement. Breathing. Shallow. Frightened. Adrian slowly rounded the corner. There she was. The woman from the window crouched behind an overturned table, chest rising and falling rapidly, hands shaking as she held something tight against her body. At first, Adrian thought it was a weapon. Then he saw the truth. A child. A boy no older than 5, silent, terrified, clinging to her scarf. Adrian froze. Not for fear, but because something inside him, something buried deep, stirred at the sight. Jensen approached behind him, rifle partially raised. Adrian lifted a hand sharply. "Lower your weapon." "But now." Jensen obeyed. The woman pressed the boy closer, shielding him with her body. Her eyes, dark, fierce, defiant, locked onto Adrian, as if he were a storm poised to destroy the last small thing she had left in this world. She spoke, voice trembling but strong. "Don't come closer." Adrian's throat tightened unexpectedly, not because of the warning, but because of her voice, raw, desperate, unbroken despite everything around her being shattered. He raised his hands slowly, a gesture of surrender. "My name is Adrian Hale. We're not here to hurt you." Her jaw tightened as if she didn't believe a single word and had every reason not to. "Sir," Jensen whispered behind him, "we don't have time." "Shut up," Adrian said without looking back. The woman shifted slightly, enough for Adrian to see the boy more clearly. His cheeks were smudged with dust. His small fingers curled into the woman's clothing with fear sharpened into instinct. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain, recognition. "We're leaving this valley soon. If you stay, you won't survive the next sweep. We can protect you both. Come with us." Her breath hitched. A flicker of emotion, fear, hope, crossed her eyes before she smothered it. "No soldier protects us. You fight each other, and we die between you." The words hit like a blow. Adrian had no answer. Not one she'd believe, not one he believed. But then the boy shifted, his gaze rising to Adrian. Wide, uncertain eyes. Not accusing, just searching. Something inside Adrian broke cleanly this time, without pain, without resistance. A fracture opening into something he hadn't felt in years. Responsibility. Not to command, not to a mission. To them. To this woman with a fire in her eyes and this terrified child she shielded as if the world had not already taken everything else from her. He lowered his voice even further. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Wind finally moved through the broken window, lifting her scarf like a breath. "Amina," she whispered. Adrian's pulse stuttered. A name. A truth. A beginning. Before he could speak again, a shot cracked from somewhere outside, sharp,
echoing, too close. Amina flinched, pulling the child tighter. Jensen swore. "Sniper!" Adrian moved without thinking, shielding Amina and the child with his body as another shot shattered the window, spraying stone fragments across the room. Shouts erupted outside. "Rebels!" Amina's breath trembled against his shoulder. The boy clung to her like a heartbeat. Adrian tightened his grip on his rifle. The war had found them, and he had no intention of letting them take them. Not her, not the child, not this moment that felt carved out of fate itself. He looked at Amina, fear and determination flashing in her eyes, and felt something ignite deep within him. Two souls, one battle, one beginning. "Stay behind me," Adrian whispered.
The sniper's bullet had barely finished echoing when the valley erupted into chaos. Amina gasped, clutching the child closer, her fingers digging into the boy's spine as if she could anchor both of them against the storm closing in. Dust swirled through the shattered window, carried by a sudden violent gust, as if the desert itself had flinched at the danger now unfolding. Adrian's mind snapped into focus with a clarity that came from years of battle and months of grief that had sharpened his instincts into a blade. He pressed his back to the cracked wall, shielding Amina and the child behind his body as another bullet struck the doorway, splintering the wood into jagged fragments. "Jensen!" Adrian barked. "Positions! Now!" Jensen dropped low, sliding behind a fractured pillar near the entrance. "Visual on sniper!" he shouted. "North Ridge! Distance 300 meters! Single shooter, at least for now!" For now meant minutes at best. Seconds if the rebels were coordinated. Adrian angled his head just enough to check on Amina. She was trembling, not with fear, but with a tension so raw it vibrated off her like heat. Her jaw was clenched, eyes burning fiercely as she tried to remain still for the child pressed into her chest. "Keep low," Adrian said gently, softer than his battlefield voice allowed. "Don't move unless I tell you to." Amina's eyes, dark, storm-filled, snapped to his. "If you die, do you think they will spare us?" He swallowed hard. "No, that's why I'm not dying." Something flickered across her face, anger, disbelief, uncertainty. But beneath that, something else, something that matched the strange spark Adrian felt when she'd said her name back in the shadowed corner. Outside, Jensen fired a controlled burst toward the ridge, buying a few seconds of silence. Adrian used those seconds. "We're taking you both out of here," he said firmly. "You and your son." Amina stiffened. "He's not my son, but he's mine to protect." Adrian blinked at the correction, but the meaning behind it hit him harder than any bullet. This woman protected strangers' children as fiercely as if they were her own. That was strength he had rarely seen, strength he had once admired in Marcus, strength he thought had died with his brother. Another shot cracked. This one hit close enough to send a shard of stone slicing across Adrian's cheek. Blood trickled down, warm against the rising heat of the room. He didn't flinch. "Jensen!" Adrian shouted. "Lay down covering fire! I'm moving them!" Jensen cursed. "You can't run them through open ground." "I'm not," Adrian cut him off. "We go through the south corridor, less exposure." Amina's breath hitched at the mention of movement. She tightened her grip on the child, whose small body trembled violently, face buried in her shoulder. "Can you run?" Adrian asked. "Can you stop the bullets?" She fired back. Her tone wasn't sarcasm, it was desperation wrapped in armor. He didn't blame her. "No," he said honestly, "but I can make sure they don't hit you." Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering before she masked it again. Jensen unleashed a round of suppressive fire, the thunderous bursts shaking dust from the ceiling. Now, this was the moment. Adrian moved. He grabbed Amina's free hand, not roughly, but firmly enough that she felt the intent, the promise, the absolute refusal to let her be lost to the fire closing in. She inhaled sharply at the contact, whether from fear or something deeper she couldn't tell.
"Stay behind me," Adrian commanded. She didn't argue. They followed the inner corridor of the half-collapsed house, their footsteps muffled by debris. The walls pulsed with heat from the sun outside, and the smell of burning metal leaked through cracks in the stone. The child whimpered softly, face hidden, small fists tangled in Amina's clothing. Adrian slowed only long enough to inspect the corridor for traps. Rebels often left wire-triggered explosives in abandoned structures. "You're scanning for devices. They set traps in here?" "They set traps everywhere." She exhaled shakily. "This world has gone mad." Adrian didn't answer. He couldn't, not when he'd begun to believe she was right. A distant explosion thundered across the valley, shaking the ground. Jensen's voice crackled through the comms. "Multiple rebels inbound from the east. We need extraction now." Adrian cursed softly. Too many enemies, too little cover, too fragile a civilian to protect. Amina stopped suddenly, tugging him back. "You must go," she whispered urgently. "Soldiers die. You know this. Take your men and leave. If you stay with us, we all die." Her words sliced deeper than she intended. Adrian stepped toward her, the heat of battle burning into something colder, sharper, more intimate. "I've lost enough people," he said quietly, voice raw. "I'm not losing you." Her breath caught, not in fear, in disbelief. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. The air between them tightened, but the moment shattered at the sound of approaching boots, fast, heavy, too close. Rebels. Adrian grabbed Amina's wrist, pulling her behind a broken pillar as he swung his rifle up. The first rebel rounded the corner. Adrian fired once, clean and precise. The man fell before he could shout. Another came, another shot, another fall. Amina sank to her knees beside the child, shielding him with her body as Adrian stepped forward, cutting down 2 more rebels before they breached the corridor. But then, a click, a sound Adrian recognized instantly. Amina heard it too. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. A grenade had rolled into the corridor. Adrian's heart slammed against his ribs. Time fractured. He lunged toward Amina, grabbing her and the child in one impossible motion. He dove through the nearest doorway, twisting mid-air to shield them as the grenade detonated behind him. The blast hit like a fist made of fire. The world roared. Dust exploded around them. Heat bit through his uniform, scraping skin, forcing the breath from his lungs. He shielded Amina completely, arms locked around her and the child, body absorbing the impact. Silence followed, heavy and choking. Amina coughed, voice shaking. "Adrian! Adrian, are you—" He didn't let go, not until he was certain the world had stopped falling. When he finally released her, she pushed herself up with trembling arms, staring at him with something close to disbelief. "You protected us," she whispered. He met her gaze. "You're alive," he said simply. "That's all that matters." Her eyes glistened, not with fear, with something dangerously close to trust. The boy reached for Adrian, small fingers brushing the soldier's torn sleeve, as if recognizing instinctively who had kept him alive. And in that moment, dust swirling around them, explosions echoing from afar, Jensen shouting through the radio to move. Adrian felt something new burning inside him. Not rage, not grief, not the emptiness that had swallowed him for months, but the beginning of a vow stronger than orders, stronger than war, stronger than the armies gathering in the valley outside. He looked at Amina, voice low, unyielding. "I'm getting you both out of here, even if I have to fight the whole damn valley to do it." Amina stared at him, and for the first time, she did not question him. She nodded, slowly, believing him, trusting him, perhaps even needing him. Outside, more rebels closed in. Inside, 2 souls braced for a war bigger than the battlefield. And somewhere deep in the shifting dust between them, something impossible began to bloom. A force no army could crush. A force born from fear, fire, and the undeniable truth. Some hearts don't surrender. They fight louder than war.
The dust took a long time to settle. Too long. Each grain danced through the corridor like drifting ash, catching in Amina's hair, clinging to Adrian's uniform, settling across the trembling shoulders of the boy pressed between them. The air tasted scorched, metallic, burned, electric with the echo of the explosion that had nearly taken them. Adrian rose slowly, scanning the corridor with soldier's precision. Every sense sharpened, sight narrowing, breath steady despite the ache blooming across his ribs from shielding both Amina and the child. The blast had thrown them hard, but luck, if such a thing still existed, had spared them the worst. Amina pushed herself upright, shaking, her hands trembling as she brushed debris from the boy's face. Her fingers hovered, gentle yet frantic, checking for blood, bruises, anything that might mean she had failed to protect him. "He's all right," Adrian said softly. Amina looked up sharply at the sound of his voice, eyes still shining with fear, but alive, fiercely alive. "You can't know that," she whispered. The edge of desperation cracked through her words before she steadied herself, smoothing the boy's hair as he clung to her. "You always think someone is fine until they're not." The grief buried beneath that sentence was unmistakable. It sat in her voice like an old wound reopened by smoke. Adrian wanted to ask, "Who did you lose? How many? How long have you carried this alone?" But her expression sealed the questions inside him. Some truths weren't asked for. They revealed themselves when the world allowed them to. And right now, the world gave them nothing. A distant roar rumbled through the valley, the rebels shouting orders outside, the grind of metal scraping against rock, the unmistakable thrum of more footsteps approaching. Jensen's voice crackled through Adrian's earpiece. "Captain, multiple hostiles converging from the east and southeast. We're boxed in. We need your position, now." Adrian pressed the transmitter. "South corridor. We're intact. Moving to extraction." "Copy, but fast. They're closing a net around the entire sector." Amina's eyebrows knit. A net? Encirclement. Adrian stood fully now, adjusting his grip on his rifle. "They're trying to trap us in the village." Amina's face blanched. "You can't fight that many." "No," Adrian answered simply, "but we don't need to win. We just need to break their line." "And if you can't?" "Then I make a new one." Her breath hitched again, that same disbelief she wore every time he spoke with the strange, raw certainty of a man who didn't expect to survive, but refused to die for the wrong reason. Adrian offered her his hand. Her gaze dropped to it, shaking, calloused, burned across the knuckles, and yet steady. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her fingers in his. Not because she believed he was invincible, but because in this burning corridor, she believed he would not abandon her. "Stay behind me," he murmured. She nodded, no argument this time. They moved swiftly through the shattered hallway. The building groaned around them, wood creaking, stone settling, the lingering heat from the explosion making the walls hiss as if the house itself resented their escape. Amina kept close, one hand gripping the back of Adrian's vest, the other holding the boy pressed to her. The child's breathing came in small, rapid bursts, but he didn't cry. Survival had been taught to him far too young. As they neared the exit, Jensen's silhouette appeared around the corner, rifle raised. "Captain, rebels are swarming the outer streets. We need to go through the courtyard." Adrian frowned. "Too exposed." "Everything's exposed," Jensen snapped. "Unless you've got a hidden tunnel no one's told me about." Amina hesitated. "There is a way." Adrian turned sharply. "What way?" "This village," her voice trembled. "I grew up coming here to visit cousins, long before the war tore everything apart. There's a storage cellar beneath the old granary. It connects to an underground irrigation trench. Narrow, but it leads past the eastern fields." Jensen stared at her incredulous. "Why didn't you say that earlier?" Amina stiffened,
eyes darkening. Because earlier, no one with a gun was asking if I should live. Jensen flushed with shame. Adrian stepped between them. "Show me the entrance." Amina nodded and led them through the broken doorway. The sunlight hit them like a slap, bright, hot, cruel. Smoke curled through the air, carrying the metallic tang of gunfire. The village lay in ruins around them, shattered walls, collapsed roofs, debris scattered across blood-specked sand. Every corner seemed to pulse with danger. Rebel voices echoed near the main road. Close, too close. Adrian crouched low, guiding Amina and the boy behind a cluster of half-destroyed pottery. Jensen took point, peering around the remnants of a fallen balcony. "2 rebels ahead," whispered Jensen, patrolling. Adrian read the distance, the angle of the shadows, the rhythm of their footsteps. "I can take them quietly. Captain, I have to." Amina gripped his sleeve. Her voice was barely a breath. "Don't let them see you." Adrian's lips lifted in the faintest ghost of a smile. "They won't." He moved. Not running, not sprinting, flowing, silent as heat moving across sand. One rebel turned slightly. Too late. Adrian's arm hooked around his throat, dragging him down behind a broken wall, silencing him before he could gasp. The second turned toward the sound, rifle raising. Adrian's knife flashed once. Clean, precise. The man dropped like a leaf falling into dust. Amina watched him return, breath caught in her throat, not in fear, but in something colder. Recognition. This man carried violence like a second skin, but he carried mercy with equal force. "Where's the granary?" Adrian asked. Amina pointed. "Across that courtyard. The door is buried under rubble. I can find it." "Then stay close." They dashed from cover to cover, weaving between broken columns and collapsed beams, until they reached what remained of the old granary, a wide stone structure whose roof had caved inward, leaving only jagged remnants standing like broken teeth. Amina knelt and brushed sand aside with one hand. Her fingers froze. "It's here." Adrian and Jensen helped her clear the debris. Beneath, a trapdoor revealed itself, wood weathered but intact. Adrian lifted it. Cool air wafted up, earthy, stale, carrying the faint scent of wheat long gone. "Down," Adrian said. "I go first," Amina replied immediately. Adrian opened his mouth to argue, but the look she gave him stopped him. Fire, memory, defiance born of surviving too many things she wasn't supposed to survive. He stepped aside. Amina descended into the darkness. The boy pressed to her chest. Jensen followed. Adrian moved last. He had one boot on the ladder when he heard it. Footsteps. Fast. Multiple. Closing in. Adrian dropped into the cellar and pulled the trapdoor shut just as a rebel voice shouted from above. Darkness swallowed them. Amina inhaled sharply. The boy buried his face in her shoulder. Boots thudded overhead. Slow, searching, dangerously close. One stopped directly above the trapdoor. Amina squeezed Adrian's arm blindly in the dark. Adrian pressed his hand lightly to hers. A silent vow. They will not touch you, not while I breathe. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, a shout from farther away pulled the rebels off. The footsteps retreated. Silence. Amina let out the breath she'd been holding, trembling. In the darkness, Adrian whispered, almost without meaning to, "You're safe." Her fingers tightened around his, barely a touch, but enough to send a shock through him. "Not safe, just alive," he exhaled. "Then we stay alive, together." A long silence followed. Finally, Amina spoke again, voice soft as a falling ember. "Why do you care whether we survive?" He didn't answer immediately. He could hear her breathing. He could feel her eyes on him in the dark. He could feel the child's small heartbeat against her chest. And he spoke the truth he didn't mean to speak. Not yet, not now, not like this. Because losing people is the only thing war ever taught me. protecting you. It feels like remembering who I was before it. Amina's breath caught, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to hope. Above them, the rebels regrouped. Below them, two souls stood closer than the darkness allowed them to see, closer than war allowed them to be, and the earth itself seemed to hold its breath.
The cellar breathed around them, slow, heavy, ancient. It was not silence that filled the darkness, but the pulse of buried time, the cool drip of unseen moisture, the soft settling of dust, the groaning of wooden beams that had held too much war for too many seasons. The air carried the scent of mold and forgotten grain, tinged with smoke drifting down from the burning world above. Adrian let his eyes adjust as he crouched near Amina. He could feel her tension, sharp, trembling beneath its armor as she held the child close. The boy's small breaths warmed her collarbone, each exhale a fragile reminder that life still existed somewhere in the ruins of this day. Above them, the rebels continued their search. Boots scraped over broken tiles, shadows moved against cracks in the trapdoor's wood. A voice barked in order, muffled, impatient. Amina's grip tightened on Adrian's sleeve in the dark, the pressure of her fingers urgent, instinctive. Adrian didn't pull away. He covered her hand with his own, grounding her, grounding himself. "It's all right," he whispered, though he knew all right was a lie. But he also knew she needed that lie to breathe. A tremor ran through her, not fear. Fear was too small a word. This was survival trying not to collapse under its own weight. He leaned closer until his breath brushed her ear. "Stay still, no sound." Her nod was barely perceptible, but he felt it through their joined hands. Jensen shifted somewhere behind them, his boots scraping faintly. Adrian didn't have to see his expression to know the man was sweating through his uniform, praying the rebels wouldn't pick up even the tiniest hint of movement. A heavy thud hit the trap door. Amina flinched violently, a small gasp tearing from her throat before she could stop it. Adrian's hand moved instantly, his palm covering her mouth, not rough, not forceful, but firm with necessity. Her breath trembled against his skin. The child whimpered, a tiny sound swallowed quickly against her chest. Adrian lowered his forehead nearly to hers, whispering through the smallest sliver of space. "Don't breathe deep, slow, quiet." Her lashes fluttered. He felt the battle inside her, fight, flee, break, endure, all warring in a single heartbeat. Above them, the rebel stomped again, then cursed under his breath. "Nothing here," the man growled. "Move, spread out." Boots scattered. The sound drifted, then faded. Only when the last echo dissolved into the earth did Adrian lift his hand from Amina's mouth. She exhaled shakily, a tear tracing down her cheek, not from weakness, but from the impossible pressure of carrying hope and dread in the same ribcage. Adrian brushed the tear away with his thumb before he even realized he had moved. Amina froze, not recoiling, but stunned. "I'm sorry," Amina murmured. No." Her voice quivered but didn't break. "Don't apologize." A long silence stretched between them, quiet, intimate, raw. The kind of silence only shared by people who have just survived death together. The cellar opened into a narrow corridor carved decades ago for grain storage. The ceiling sagged, beams bowed under weight, roots pushing through stone like fingers searching for release. "Where's the trench entrance?" Jensen asked. Amina lifted the lantern Adrian had given her, its faint glow casting soft gold over her features. "Back here," she whispered, guiding them through the low passage. "But it's small, too small for comfort." Adrian stepped ahead. "I'll go first." "No," Amina said, grabbing his wrist. "If the tunnel collapsed over time, you'd get stuck. I know how to read these walls. I go." Jensen blinked. "You read walls?" She nodded once. "My father built homes. I learned with him." Adrian didn't trust the tunnel. He didn't trust the rebels. He barely trusted himself anymore. But he trusted her.
"Amina, be careful." Something softened in her eyes, something that startled her as much as it startled him. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promised the boy." But her gaze lingered on Adrian a heartbeat longer than it needed to, almost like the promise was meant for him too. The trench opened into a narrow corridor hidden behind a wall of clay jars, cracked but still upright. Amina pushed them aside with Jensen's help. Behind them, a rectangular opening gaped, a tunnel barely wide enough for two people side by side. Cool, damp air wafted outward, brushing over their sweat-heated skin. The darkness beyond felt different, less hostile, almost like a calm waiting to be disturbed. Amina ducked inside first with the child in her arms. Adrian followed so closely behind that he could hear her heartbeat, light, rapid, too brave for its speed. The trench sloped downward into deeper shadow. Roots hung like thin fingers from the ceiling, brushing their hair, scraping their clothes. Water pooled along the walls, dripping faintly into a narrow ditch that ran like a spine along the floor. Jensen whispered, "How long is this thing?" "About 600 meters, if it hasn't collapsed." "If it has collapsed," Adrian murmured behind her, "we find another way through." She stopped, so suddenly that Adrian nearly bumped into her. She turned her head slightly, enough for him to see the outline of her profile in the lantern's glow. "Why do you talk like that?" she whispered. "Like what?" "Like you don't care whether you survive." Adrian's jaw tightened. He could have lied. He could have shrugged. He could have ignored the question. But in this tunnel, in this world where bullets waited above and darkness surrounded them, lies felt pointless. "Amina," his voice was low, rough, "I care more about keeping you alive right now than I care about myself." She inhaled sharply. Her steps faltered. "You don't know me," she whispered, breath trembling. "Maybe not your past, but I know your courage. I know your strength. I know the way you protected that boy when everything was falling apart. That's enough." She shifted the boy gently and whispered, "You saw me at my worst." "No," Adrian shook his head. "I saw you at your strongest." Her throat worked, swallowing something she didn't want to reveal. Jensen cleared his throat awkwardly. Captain, we should keep moving before the rebels get creative up there." Amina nodded quickly, turning away from Adrian, but not before he saw the way her lashes shimmered with emotion she refused to voice. They moved deeper. The lantern flickered, shadows clinging to the curved walls as the tunnel tightened, forcing them closer. The ground grew uneven, forcing them to reach out to steady each other. A sudden cracking sound echoed ahead. Amina froze. Adrian raised his rifle instantly. "Stay behind me." "No," she whispered urgently, shoving her palm against his chest. "That sound, it's not rebels." Another crack, a groan of wood, a shift of stone. Then, a deafening rumble. "The ceiling!" Amina gasped. "Move!" Adrian shouted. She lunged forward with the boy. Adrian grabbed her waist, pulling her clear just as a massive slab of stone crashed behind them. Dust rolled over them in choking waves. The lantern nearly slipped from Amina's hands. Jensen coughed violently. "We're cut off!" Amina whipped around, panic flashing. "The tunnel! The rebels! They'll break the entrance! They'll trap us!" Adrian caught her shoulders, steadying her. "Look at me," he murmured. Her breaths came fast and shallow. "Adrian, if the tunnel collapses further—" "Look at me." She did. Her eyes searched his, wild, terrified, human, and something inside her steadied. He spoke softly, steadily, as though his words could hold up the tunnel itself. "You're not dying down here. Neither is he. Neither is anyone." "How can you know that?" Her voice cracked. "Because I'm going to get you out. I don't fail the people I choose to protect." Her breath trembled. Something broke open in her expression then, fear mingling with something softer, something she tried to hide but could not fully extinguish. Not now. Not in this tunnel where hearts had nowhere left to run. A distant rumble echoed from far behind the collapse. Jensen stiffened. "Captain, that wasn't stone." Amina's eyes widened. "It was voices," she whispered. "Rebels. Close. hunting through the broken corridors. Amina clutched the boy tightly. Adrian raised his rifle, body angling in front of them both. The rebels had found the cellar. They were coming, and the only path left was forward, deeper into the ancient trench where earth and fate entwined. Adrian glanced once more at Amina, her breath trembling, her eyes glowing with dread and something dangerously close to trust. "We run," Adrian whispered. Amina nodded, and together, hearts pounding louder than their footsteps, they plunged into the darkness, towards a fate that would bind them more fiercely than any battlefield could.
The tunnel narrowed until it felt like the earth was trying to close its fist around them. The lantern's flame fluttered with each breath, casting frantic shadows along the curved walls. Roots dangled from the ceiling like frayed threads, brushing Amina's hair and Adrian's shoulders as they pushed forward. The air grew thicker, heavier, pressed down by tons of soil and stone above their heads. Behind them, through the collapsed section of trench, faint echoes of rebels' voices seeped like poison through rock. A boy's whisper broke the tense quiet. "Amina, I'm scared." Her heart clenched. She pulled him closer, adjusting his small body against her chest, feeling his thin arms wrap around her neck. "I know," she murmured against his hair, "but we keep walking. That's what brave people do." Adrian heard the tremor in her voice. He also heard the steel. He walked just ahead of them, lantern lifted in one hand, rifle slung and ready on his back. His shoulders brushed the tunnel on both sides, his presence filling the narrow space like a shield. Jensen followed behind, occasionally glancing back, listening for any sound of pursuit. The earth itself seemed to listen with them. Drip, drip, drip. Water fell from some unseen crack, landing in a shallow groove etched along the tunnel floor. Adrian's boots splashed lightly through the slick path, leaving faint prints that the lantern light chased and then swallowed. "How far now?" Jensen muttered, voice barely above a breath. Amina squinted ahead. Her father's voice rose unbidden in her memory, teaching her how to read the patterns of stone, the curve of walls, the direction of faint air currents. "Not much farther," she said. "The ground is sloping up again. Feel it?" Adrian could. His thighs burned with each step. The incline had shifted. The air carried a subtle change as well, a hint of dryness, the faintest ghost of wind. "Good," he murmured. "We're not dying underground. I hate closed spaces." Jensen huffed under his breath. "You've been crawling through tunnels and ruins for years. Now you tell me you hate closed spaces?" Adrian shrugged once. "Doesn't mean I like them. Just means I've had practice being scared." Amina's gaze flicked to him at that. "You get scared?" she asked quietly. The boy shifted, listening. Adrian didn't look back, but his voice softened, losing some of its hard edge. "Any soldier who says he doesn't is either lying or lost." "Which one are you?" whispered Amina. He hesitated. "I was lost, for a long time." The lantern light caught the brief, almost invisible motion of his fingers brushing underneath the dog tags beneath his shirt. "And now?" she pressed. He didn't answer right away. The tunnel curved sharply left, forcing them single file for several meters, his body brushing so close to the stone that dust smeared along his arm. When it widened again, he finally spoke. "Now I have something worth being afraid for," he said, voice barely audible. The words hung between them like a fragile bridge. Amina's breath caught. He kept walking, as if he hadn't just exposed the rawest part of himself in the middle of a dark trench between echoes of death and the smell of damp soil. She stared at his silhouette. "You mean the mission?" she said, as if offering him a safe escape. He didn't take it. "I mean you," he said. The boy shifted, not understanding the weight of the moment. Jensen looked away into the darkness, pretending not to hear. Amina's pulse stumbled. "Adrian." "I mean you," he repeated, firmer now. "You and him, and the people waiting on the other side of this." Her eyes stung unexpectedly. "For you, this is one more operation in a list of many. For me, this is the first thing in a long time that doesn't feel like just war." The tunnel answered with a long, hollow silence. Then,
a faint breath of wind brushed their faces. Cool, dry, free. Amina lifted her chin. There's an opening ahead. Adrian moved faster now, the promise of daylight feeding his stride. The tunnel grew slightly taller, the walls widening, the ceiling arching up. Light appeared, weak at first, then brighter. A gray-blue glow painted across the rough stone. Stay close, he warned. We don't know what's waiting outside. Jensen checked his rifle. I vote for cake and a ceasefire. Be satisfied with not being shot, Adrian muttered. They reached the tunnel's end. A slanted shaft of light poured in through a jagged mouth where the trench met the surface. Sand had spilled inward, forming a small slope leading into the world above. Beyond the glare of daylight, silhouettes of rocks framed the opening. Adrian extinguished the lantern and set it aside. The sudden contrast of light stabbed his eyes. He turned to Amina. I go first. If it's clear, I'll signal with 3 taps on the stone. If not, you don't come back, she finished quietly. He met her gaze, letting her see the truth. He had no intention of not coming back, and yet he knew that was not his decision alone to make. I'll come back, he said. You said that before, in the house. And I meant it then, too. She swallowed, fingers tightening around the boy. Come back, Adrian Hale. The way she said his name felt like a tether thrown across a battlefield. He nodded once and climbed the slope. The light hit him full in the face as he emerged, the wind roaring suddenly in his ears. The smell of dust and smoke greeted him, a harsh, open scent that felt like a slap after the close dampness of the trench. He crouched low, his eyes scanning the horizon. They had surfaced on the outskirts of the valley. Behind them, the village lay half hidden by rock formations, smoke still rising in curling black threads. Ahead, the land sloped into a dry riverbed, and beyond that, jagged hills tattooed the horizon. No immediate movement, no visible rebels, but they spotted something on a distant ridge. Scopes, binoculars, watching. They didn't have much time. Adrian tapped 3 times on the stone. A moment later, Amina emerged, shielding the boy's face from the sun. The wind tugged at her scarf, sending the red fabric whipping behind her like a banner of stubborn life. Jensen followed, blinking hard against the brightness. Clear enough, Adrian said. We move north, stick to the rocks. Our convoy can meet us past that ridge, if they're still in one piece. And if they're not? Amina asked. Then I steal one of the rebels' trucks. She huffed, a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. Of course you would. They descended into the dry riverbed, boots crunching over cracked mud and scattered stones. The sun beat down mercilessly now, drawing sweat quickly from their skin. The boy's breaths came in short pants. Amina shifted him on her hip, fatigue starting to gnaw at her muscles. Adrian noticed. Here, he said, reaching for the child. Let me carry him for a while. Amina hesitated. The boy looked at her, then at Adrian, eyes wide but curious. It's all right, she whispered. He saved you. He won't drop you now. The boy released her, uncertain but trusting enough to go. Adrian lifted him easily, settling the child against his chest, feeling his thin arms wrap around her neck. His gaze drifted once to the metal hidden under his shirt. Another boy he didn't save. Another life he couldn't carry. He pressed forward anyway. Adrian, Amina said, suddenly, walking at his side now. What was his name? He didn't have to ask who. Marcus, he replied quietly. My brother. Amina's expression softened with a pain that was not hers and yet understood him perfectly. He died in this war? He died following me, Adrian said, voice flat at first, habitually numb. But the numbness cracked as he added, he believed we could still make a difference, that we could protect people like you. I stopped believing that after I watched him bleed out on the sand. The boy's fingers tightened unconsciously. And now? Amina asked. Adrian glanced at her. Now? His voice roughened. Now I'm trying to be the man he thought I was. The wind tugged at her scarf again. The red fabric brushed his arm like a question. You are, she said simply. He huffed a broken laugh. You've known me less than a day. I've known war my whole life. I know what it makes of people. I know those who run towards the fire for themselves and those who run for others. There is a difference. She held his gaze. You are not running for yourself. The words lodged deep inside him, like a seed pressed into soil burned by too many seasons. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine that maybe something could grow there again. A sharp crack split the air. A bullet slammed into a rock near their feet, spraying stone fragments across the ground. "Down!" Adrian roared. They dove behind a jutting boulder, dust exploding around them. Adrian shielded the child, his body curving instinctively towards Amina as well, pulling her into the narrow cover. Jensen pressed against the other side of the rock. "Snipers on the ridge! They must have seen movement!" Adrian peeked out for half a second, enough to spot the glint of a scope and the shadow of at least 3 shooters. "We're pinned," Adrian growled. "Riverbed's a killing line." Amina's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst. "Is there another trench? Another tunnel? Anything?" "No time," Adrian said. "No cover to reach it. We break their focus or we die here." "How?" Jensen snapped. "We can't outshoot snipers on a ridge with 1 rifle and a miracle." Amina stared at the ridge, at the distance, at the impossible angle. And then she looked at Adrian.